What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Film Room Podcast. This is episode 7. I am Joe Baress, your host, and I'm here with, of course, my co-host, Joby Fawcett. Joby, how are we doing tonight?
Well, Joe, it's been a very busy evening for us here in the Times-Tribune Sports Department. I want to begin by sending out congratulations to Scranton Prep's girls tennis team, the defending District 2 and PIAA Class 2A champions. Also defended the Lackawanna League Championship. It's their third championship in a row, so we've been kind of getting some results together here for, a recap of the entire, is the last day of the Lackawanna League regular season. So been a little bit busy there. Joe, got some volleyball coming in. And then, again, it's been a very, very troubling last 48 hours here if you're involved in even in the Film Room Podcast here with the Hollywood. We've got deaths all over the place tonight. Pete Rose, the Hall of Famer, or soon-to-be Hall of Famer, I guess I should say.
Yeah, true.
Former Philadelphia Phillies and Cincinnati Reds star player passed away at the age of 83 tonight. And we had Dikembe Mutombo earlier today die. And boy, even in the world of Hollywood, some tragic deaths yesterday. So everything's keep whacking away at us here, Joe.
Yeah, seriously, you're right. And we get to that later. Didn't Taggart from Beverly Hills Cop die?
Oh, Joe, just
right?
Devastating.
Yeah, just
devastating. Takes me back. We just celebrated the 40th anniversary of Beverly Hills Cop, but he starred in the movie.
Exactly. So, yeah, you're right. Rough day, not great. And let's start off with some positive.
Yeah.
We are joined by the Times-Tribune Athlete of the Week, Lilia Calvert from Abington Heights girls soccer. Lilia, how you doing?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
Good. Hey, thanks so much for joining us. Just to run down why Lilia earned our award this week. She had a goal and an assist in a 2-1 win over Valley View. It was a Lackawanna League Division I battle. Abington handed Valley View their first loss of the season. The goal in that game was also the 89th of her career, which surpassed school record of 88 set by 2003 graduate Megan Callahan. I believe Lilia also added a goal earlier in the week as well in a 5-0 victory over Delaware Valley. So let's start there. You scored the 89th goal of your career. You now hold the school record. How does it feel, Lilia?
It feels amazing. It was just all together a surreal experience because we're actually really close with Megan Callahan. So she came to the game and she was there supporting me. So just being able to put that goal in the last 2 minutes of the game was super exciting.
Lilia, so I got a chance to speak with you earlier this year because you verbally committed to Rutgers, if my memory serves me well. And, you had said at that time it was going to be a real help to you to be a little bit more relaxed coming into the season, knowing your college decision had been made. It appears that you've been playing at a very high level. Have you been relaxed, and how has the season gone for you individually as you're playing this season?
Yeah, this season has been a little bit more relaxed in some aspects, but also this year I'm a captain, so I've had to fill that role and keep the energy really high for my team. And also they expect a high energy from me at practice and during games. So from that aspect, it's been hard work, but this year I'm not trying to break any of my old records from last year, goals in a season. I'm just trying to keep going along with the season and not get hurt is my biggest thing.
Yeah, speaking of goals from last season, 65 scored last season, which is just an incredible feat. You guys went on a great run to the state title game. So let's talk a little bit about that. You obviously said your role has seemed to change a little bit with a lot of key seniors from last year leaving. How are you enjoying, your leadership role this season?
I love it. I've always been a leader on all my club teams and everything. So finally being able to have the title on the high school team has been a big accomplishment. I think that just in general, I'm a loud person and I like being in charge, and I like knowing what to do and telling people what to do, and just being able to do that with being able to do it this year is exciting.
Lilia, for you, you have been extremely committed to the sport of soccer from a very young age. Kind of tell our listeners and those who subscribe to the podcast how you came to find soccer as your sport and how much you've enjoyed your development through the years to where you are now with Abington Heights.
I feel like it's always just been something I've known. When I was younger, I did probably a billion sports, and gymnastics was probably my other really big sport. It was softball, soccer, and gymnastics. And I was pretty good softball, but then gymnastics, I was making the team. It was right when I was starting my first travel soccer team, and I had to pick one or the other, and I dropped gymnastics immediately, stuck with soccer. And yeah, I feel like it's just always been a constant.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of, making it to the state title game last year, how has your team and yourself kind of handled those probably high expectations coming into this season?
I think that we've handled it more than what anyone way better than anyone was expecting. Obviously, we lost 5 of our starters, which was huge for us because they were all upperclassmen, all huge roles on our team. So all of our underclassmen, we have a sophomore starter, and all of our junior starters this year, which is the bulk of our team, did either get any playing time last year or much playing time last year. So them coming in and filling the spots really well is just been so extremely impressive. I'm so proud of everyone.
Lilia, how do you kind of bring to the field this year with Abington Heights in your new role as a captain some of the lessons that you've learned and experienced as a member of a very competitive travel team, which, if I'm not mistaken, made it to the national tournament last year? So tell me what you've brought to this group of Lady Comets.
I think all of our expectations for each other are set at a really high level, and not even just me, from everyone else on the team. We all expect each other to be the best versions of ourselves and push each other on a daily basis. So for me, I feel it's just keeping a positive energy, because when we seem to get upset with each other, something goes wrong and we all get mad, then that's when we start playing worse, I guess you could say. So just trying to keep it positive, because obviously mistakes are going to happen when you're trying to play at such a fast pace.
Yeah, definitely. One of the cool things you mentioned is that Megan Callahan was at the game where you broke the record. What is your relationship with her? Did you get a chance to talk to her, and what is her relationship with the team? That's really cool that she was there.
Yeah, we took some pictures after. She made a really funny sign for me. I think it said "Call 911. This girl stole my record." So we took a couple pictures after. Really funny. But she was one of my first soccer coaches that I ever had, and she coached me at Riverfront when I was 2, I think, 2 or 3 maybe. I think I was 3 when I had her. I had her for, I think, a year maybe, but then we just became really close family friends, because we made such a connection with her. My mom made such a connection with her when she was my coach. And then I had her at Keystone Camp for soccer, summer, I think it was 2017. We really reconnected then. And I was having some back injury problems when I was younger, so I did PT at her place of work, and we've always just had a really close bond. I would go to her on college games when she was playing in college, and she would come to some of the high school games, and when I was back on the South Abington travel team, she would come to those games. So it's just a really good friendship that we have.
That's awesome. Listen, so it's just always nice to be able to kind of connect with some of the historic members of the Abington Heights girls soccer team, as well as try to break their records, Lilia. So listen, I'd be remiss if I did not mention you are a multi-sport athlete, even though you said you kind of always focus in on soccer. You are a track star at Abington Heights as well. And how has that experience been for you? You're a member of that program that never seems to lose. And, there's got to be a sense of pride that you get from those teammates as well.
Yeah, the track team is track is so fun. Track, I go and I have such a blast at practice. The coaches are by far the best coaching staff I've ever had in any sport. I love all my coaches for track. they always are so understanding, and especially with my travel soccer schedule, because that's when soccer's like really busy for me. They like club soccer is really busy for me. They always are like understanding with my schedule and like me having to miss practice sometimes to go to soccer. And obviously the level is super high there too, because they haven't lost a meet in 100 and something meets. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. Lilia, I noticed in your Athlete of the Week interview you did with our colleague Scott Walsh that you said you admired Carly Lloyd. I didn't know she also went to Rutgers. You know, obviously she's one of the best, or was one of the best U.S. soccer players ever. What do you admire about Carly Lloyd's game?
I think that she's had to overcome a lot of struggles in her career. When she first went to the national team, she wasn't getting any playing time. She didn't start, and she never stopped. She kept going, and she earned her starting spot. She made a lot of like historical moments happen. So I think I admire her hard work the most.
Leah, so we've mentioned a couple of times here that you're verbally committed to Rutgers for your future. First of all, what does it mean for you, for all the hard work that you've put in to, starting at a very young age, to become a Division I athlete? And how did you settle on Rutgers? Because I'm sure there's several schools courting you.
Yes. So obviously committing is like one of the biggest things anyone could ever do, because it's it depends on your whole future. Like it sets everything up for you and what your future's going to align with. So committing to a Big Ten program is obviously a huge, huge deal. It also just lifted like such a relief off my shoulders. Like I said, like this season, like I could start taking it easier, like focus on like getting more technical and even understanding the game even better than I can. So when I go to college, I can have like prior knowledge and also build off of that from my coaches and stuff and my future teammates. And what set it for Rutgers for me was definitely the coaching staff. Mike O'Neill is one of the nicest people anyone would ever meet. Like if you got to talk to him, you would understand immediately why I committed there. Also, I like went to training sessions, and the level like of intensity and like play was just incredible. And obviously they're a very good program. They're doing very well this year. They just had a 7-game shutout streak with no goals conceded on them. So that was pretty good. They just tied Michigan, which is the number 1 team in the country, yesterday, 1-1. So they're just a really, really good team.
Absolutely. I think I also saw in your Athlete of the Week interview, I don't know that once you get to Rutgers, you could keep your Penn State football allegiances, but you are a Penn State fan. And we're obviously very heavy into Penn State in this area. So what do you think? They just had a nice win over Illinois. What do you think of Penn State football so far this season?
I've been pretty busy. I haven't been watching a lot of college football, I have to admit, but Penn State football is obviously so fun. The culture is crazy at Penn State when it comes to football and really any sport. So that's always super exciting.
So Lily, before I let you go, because a lot of my focus at work is on high school football, there's a huge rivalry game this Friday when Abington Heights takes on Scranton Prep. Now, you are also part of this rivalry because in soccer it's pretty intense as well between the two schools. Are you looking forward to the game on Friday with the football team?
Yes, I am. I will definitely be there.
Awesome.
Excellent. Well, I think if you don't have anything else, Joby, I think that could wrap us up. You good, Joby?
Absolutely. Lilia, this was fantastic. Nice to get a chance to talk to you again. And I wish you the best of luck as your season continues.
All right. That was our Times-Tribune Athlete of the Week, Lilia Calvert. Joby, I'm sure people realize this, but maybe people who don't follow soccer, Lilia Calvert's like an incredible athlete. To put it into perspective, like she just passed Abington Heights all-time leading goal scorer from 2003, and she's a junior. So
yeah, Joe. So one of the things I enjoyed just kind of mentioning with her is the track connection there, because one of the things that you'll see if you ever see her in action is her speed is incredible on a soccer field.
Yeah.
And she is a sprinter with the Abington Heights track team. And, yeah, she's terrific. She's our reigning player of the year. You know, you mentioned a couple of the numbers from last year when Abington Heights reached the PIAA final. I mean, that's a pretty high bar for her to try to reach or clear in her junior year.
Yeah.
It's a little bit different dynamic. Of course, as she mentioned, with the starting team is a much different. 5 graduated seniors from last year, but Abington Heights has recovered. They're starting to get some wins here, and certainly a great milestone for her.
Absolutely. And I think one of the people she lost from last year was Lindsay Tasker, who's at Lackawanna College, I believe. I think she had 41 saves over the weekend. It's just
yeah, she's pretty good.
Yeah, she's pretty good. So let's move on to a couple other things. Joby, is there anything else you want to say about the Scranton Prep girls tennis team? I know we talk about them a lot, but got anything else for that?
Yeah, Joe, it's just impressive. The program that's there, every year we kind of just understand that it's going to come down between Scranton Prep and Abington Heights for the Lackawanna League Championship. And in the coming days and weeks, we're going to have the postseason here for girls tennis. And Scranton Prep and Abington Heights will both be the favorites in their respective classifications. But just an incredible 3 years for Scranton Prep here, unbeaten in the Lackawanna League during that time. And I did the math real quick, and I hope it's right, that Alyssa Wigley, who was the number 1 singles player for the past 2 seasons and now is playing at number 2 singles. So she finished up her 4-year career in the Lackawanna League with a record in singles of, I believe, 55-1, with that 1 loss coming in during her freshman year. So she's been amazing over the last 3 seasons. The number 3 singles player in the lineup for Scranton Prep, Emma Cuck, she has not lost for 3 years of varsity play in singles tennis in the Lackawanna League. So this is a very talented team and an extremely focused team, Joe, as it defends its District 2 championship and, of course, will defend its PIAA championship if it is so fortunate enough to win its District 2 championship.
Absolutely. A very impressive Joby. Another thing that happened today, actually, Cade Kelleher from Abington Heights Golf shot a 2 over 74 to win the District 2 Class 3A title at Elk View Country Club. So congratulations to him, and a couple of WVC Wyoming Valley Conference golfers. Nick Werner shot a 6 under 66 to take the Class 2A title. Not too shabby. And Crestwood Sienna Smith won the girls Class 3A title with an 8 over 80. So some good stuff there in golf. Joe, anything you want to touch on as far as sports?
Just because I mentioned it last week when you had me on here, the tremendous talent from the Abington Heights and Scranton Prep golf programs. I think, what did Abington Heights take, the first 4 spots?
Yeah, it was just...
And boys, 3A?
Just really, really impressive.
Incredible. That's just outstanding. Now, listen, we're getting into the postseason here now in golf, and we're going to see some really fantastic scores. And it's a real credit to these kids. Look, I can't golf, so I appreciate the talent it takes to shoot these types of scores. I believe this event was held at Elkview Country Club, Joe.
Correct.
That's a pretty challenging golf course. And so, to have the kind of scores these players did put up today, it's a real credit to the dedication and the number of rounds and practice rounds these kids put in to get ready for the season and for the postseason as well. So congratulations to those medalists and those who qualified for states as well.
All right, Joby, and let's talk a little high school football here. Joby, you picked, you know what? I actually think you ended up having the game of the week, but the game of the week that you picked ended up being a good game.
Yeah, Joe, so that's rare for me because I just seem to be jinxed in the last couple of seasons. But if you remember back to last week, Joe, I said that I thought, outside of Scranton Prep being a little bit ahead of most of the teams in Division One, I thought that there was going to be some real tight competition between, teams like Scranton and Valley View, Delaware Valley, Abington Heights, when those teams started to go head to head.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened last weekend. I mean, you got a chance to see on Friday night. I was intrigued, Joe, because I was at the Lackawanna Trail at Old Forge game, which we'll touch on a little bit, but I kept checking the Twitter feed of to get updates because I was so into that game as well. It was such an intense game, and I knew it was going to be a good game, and I'm glad you got a chance to take it in.
Yeah, Joby, I mean, full disclosure, I mean, we all picked Valley View to win this game over Scranton, but Scranton came out and they really, really battled and kind of almost had Valley View on the ropes. So pretty impressive by them. I mean, probably I've seen them 3 times. This is, even though they lost, this probably the most impressive that I've seen them this season. The stats don't entirely show it, but Scranton was able to move the ball with the pass, and they've got, as we mentioned in the past, they've got athletes. Tay Weeks made an incredible leaping interception at one point. So this ends up being a really good game. Scranton was up 21-20 in midway through the fourth quarter. Valley View's driving, and it ends up being a 2nd and 6 play where Preston Reed kind of runs into a wall of Scranton defenders, and they appear to have him stopped, but Preston Reed just kept motoring, and he ends up getting 4 yards to set up a 3rd and 2, and that sets up Valley View touchdown, gives them a 26-21 lead. And really, as I need to say the stats for Preston Reed: 202 yards rushing, 1 touchdown on 21 carries. In the first 5 games, he had 228 yards on the ground. So this was kind of, as you know, Joby, this is a 3-headed monster. Preston Reed, Nick Kaharski, and Zach Walensky. And it was Preston Reed's turn, and he really, really carried that offense running the ball. And, you know, you have to obviously give the Valley View offensive line credit. Short yard situations, they were fantastic. They only punted 1 time. They were able to convert on 3rd and 5 or less 7 times, and big 4th and 1 on that go-ahead touchdown drive. So, you know, I think that, you know, Valley View would say they didn't, I don't think they thought they played their best. There were a lot of penalties, a lot of Valley View penalties, I believe 11. So I think they have stuff to clean up, but I think ultimately this was a good game between 2 good teams.
Yeah, John, you know, I'm always interested, as I've mentioned to you a couple of times, in how 2 teams respond the following week after a game like that, because, you know, so often if you just look at the numbers, Joe, and you know, I'm not overly dependent on the numbers, but we get so many games where teams are kind of taking starters out in the 3rd quarter, or certainly before the end of the 3rd quarter, and you know, when you get one of these real intense 4-quarter battles, and we had a couple of them this weekend, it's always interesting to see how the kids respond the following week, because they do need a little bit more time to recover physically and mentally, Joe. This is a type of season here, you know, like Scranton's already qualified for the District 2-4 Class 6A playoffs. So that's not really what Scranton is worried about, but what its main concern is it wants to see improvement.
Right.
As the season continues, because last year Scranton got off to a really good start with its win-loss record and then went into a tailspin. And I don't think, you know, Coach Steve Shumbrays, he wants to make sure that these kids don't lose that focus that you need to maintain, certainly when you're going to be heading into weeks 11 and, if you're lucky enough, to week 12. Valley View, this has been the second, or probably a third, really tight game that the Cougars have played over the course of the last month, right, Joe? I mean, you had the comeback victory against Wilkes-Barre area, the comeback victory against Abington Heights, and now a comeback victory over Scranton, all with great performances in the 4th quarter of those games. So, you know, for Valley View, you look at what it's had to do to kind of get itself to 5-1 after losing to Scranton Prep in week 1. They've put a lot of demands on their bodies, and you know, really have, you always kind of worry about injuries around this time of the year as well. And when you have kids who play that power football game like Preston Reed,
Yep.
Zach Swinski, the lineman that Valley View puts out there on both sides of the football. So that's what I'm interested to see next week, because I think Valley View's got a real test playing against North Pocono this week.
Right. And to piggyback off that, Joby, there's two things I wanted to hit on. And one you mentioned, Valley View losing to Scranton Prep 33-0 on opening night and then rattling off 5 straight victories. Scranton losing to Scranton Prep 43-0, I believe. And, they come out in this game and they play well. So those are just these two teams. Maybe that shows you what you're going to see. They both bounce back very well from 2 routes. And just to add a little bit on Valley View, you could tell that this team, I'm sure you know this already, Joby, this team really wants that district title. You go onto the field after the game and that's what they're talking about in the huddle. That's what they want. Scott Wazilchak, I talked to him after the game. They're focused on that district title, and Valley View is learning how to win these close games. They've fought hard this year, and they definitely have the pedigree of a team that can win a district title if they keep playing like they're playing.
Yeah, Joe, and there's a lot of motivation there for Valley View. Lost in the district final to Crestwood a couple of years ago. Crestwood went to the semifinals in the state playoffs. Lost to Dallas last year in the district final because it could not convert an extra point after a touchdown, 21-18 in the loss. Dallas goes to the state final. So, yeah, I think Valley View knows after losing to Scranton Prep that, they're going to need a couple of things to happen in order to share a division championship. So clearly their focus is on the postseason. And the biggest thing is, Joe, you see that improvement and that recovery process after that loss on opening night.
Absolutely. Joby, let's turn to the game that you covered on Saturday at Comet Stadium. Delaware Valley 35, Abington Heights 28. Incredible game. Let me just go through a couple of the stats before I turn it over to you. Mike Iazolino, was that?
Iazolino, yeah.
Iazolino, 227 yards rushing, 4 touchdowns on 37 carries. Logan Olsemer, 56 yards and a touchdown on 8 carries, including the game-winning touchdown run with 16 seconds left in the fourth. He was also 16 of 22 passing for 169 yards. He did have a pick. But also on Abington's side, Nick Bradley had 282 yards passing with 3 touchdowns. From the outside, Joby, this seemed like a great game, and it seems like both teams played well. But what was it like being there?
Well, Joe, it was a wonderfully exciting game. And, anytime you get an opportunity to cover something like this as a high school football beat writer, it really is. It makes it worthwhile because the kids really played hard from both sides. One emotional day for Abington Heights. It was senior day or parents' day, however you want to define it. And kids played their hearts out from Abington Heights. And Delaware Valley, we know what the story is with this program this year. 0-4 to start the season, which is now becoming more common for Delaware Valley because it plays such a challenging first month of the year, and trying to get itself straightened out. These two teams played in the District 2 Class 5A championship game last year, so there's a little bit of a rivalry building up there. They've always kind of been the top 2 big school teams in the Lackawanna Football Conference. They play for the I-84 Black and Blue Jug. And, Joe, this was really a terrific football game. Sometimes you get these tight games that are not necessarily very well played. This one really was. And it really came down to a couple of, they always do. High school games come down to a couple of key plays. But really, you mentioned Mike Iazolino, 37 carries, Chip.
Yeah, that's a lot.
I probably would have had to play 3 games in my high school career and get 37 carries and 227 yards. So he was terrific in between the tackles. That's the big thing that people don't realize about Mike. He's not a big guy. He's about 185, maybe 190 pounds, but he does run the ball in between the tackles. He had a big 57-yard touchdown run in the game. Delaware Valley, really, Delaware Valley doesn't huddle up, but it still plays kind of within a phone booth. Okay.
Yeah.
Really depend on their guys up front. They're a little bit more experienced up front than people might expect, but they're still trying to develop some players. One in particular is freshman Trey Newton, who was fantastic. 12 catches for 120 yards, I think, Joe. He's got, I think, 42 catches in his first season here as a freshman. The school record at Delaware Valley is 46 receptions, and he's a dynamic player, Joe. He made some one-handed catches. He made a toe tap that Nate Burleson would have been proud of on the sideline in the game. And again, it came down to Logan Olsemer, the veteran quarterback. His dad's the head football coach, Keith Olsemer. And Delaware Valley methodically and calmly drove the length of the field and did not throw the ball during that series of plays. And within the final 14 seconds or 16 seconds, whatever it was, and he took a great play action fake and around. He had done it earlier in the drive to the other side, to the left side. And in this instance, he came around the right end and he made a great dive for the end zone and scored a touchdown that Delaware Valley was able to on with a 35-28 victory. But that being said, Joe, terrific performance by Nick Bradley and his receivers, Sean Theodore and Shane Brower. Both of those kids had over 130 yards receiving. And Bradley, he can fling it. I mean, he has got a cannon for a right arm. We know that he's already a NCAA Division I commit to Auburn as a pitcher in baseball, but he can really throw the football. And, he hit some deep balls, some deep throws, which a lot of people sometimes question whether he can do that, but he can. And he really, he was hitting this slant pattern, Joe, on a regular basis because he just throws the ball so darn hard.
Yeah.
It's hard to react to it if you're a defensive player at the high school level. So, look, these two teams are probably now focused on the postseason as well. You've got Pittston area in the mix there in Class 5A. So we'll see how it all plays out. But this was a really good, well-played high school football game.
Yeah, absolutely. Joby, thank you for mentioning Trey Newton. 12 catches, 112 yards. Like you said, Sean Theodore, Shane Brower, 6 catches, 135 yards, 2 touchdowns for Theodore. Brower had 7 catches, 138 yards, and a touchdown. I think, a heartbreaking loss, but I think that Abington Heights really showed something in this game, and obviously Delaware Valley as well. So what do you think about that, Joe?
It certainly sets the stage for this week, Joe. We touched on it with Abington Heights visiting Scranton Prep on Friday night. We know that Scranton Prep has been dominant in its Lackawanna Football Conference games to this point, but its closest game was a 28-25 win over Delaware Valley.
Right.
So, I don't like to use comparisons as necessarily a gauge to what we can expect on Friday night. But what I will say is the Abington Heights kids, they do view this game as a rivalry, and the Scranton Prep kids do view this game as a rivalry. So I think you're going to see a really intense football game. It's been a while since Abington Heights has beaten Scranton Prep. I believe it was 2016 the last time it happened. So this is going to be an interesting matchup because I think both teams do match up pretty well with each other. It's going to be an intense game, Joe, and it's an important one too. If Scranton Prep wins the game on Friday night, it will clinch a tie for the Lackawanna Football Conference Division I championship. And again, Abington Heights doesn't want to give too much ground in that District 2 Class 5A power rating standings.
Yeah, absolutely not. Let's touch on a few others. Well, Joby, you were at another football game as well. Lackawanna Trail, 49, Old Forge 13. Isaac Ryan, 234 yards, 4 touchdowns on only 12 carries. Talk about that game a little bit.
He was impressive, Joe. It's always nice when one of the young men who I single out to be the player to watch in Game Face on a Friday has that kind of a game. Here's another one. He's not very big. He's probably 5'8", and 165 maybe. He's a wrestler too, right, Joe? So what's he around 160, 165?
That's about right. You're right. It was funny. I interviewed him the week before, and usually these kids are a little taller than me, but he was eye level. So sorry.
Yeah. So he kind of does have that quickness and that breakaway speed. But I'll tell you, Joe, he broke some tackles. So I was impressed with his play in this game against Old Forge. And it was a very good win for Lackawanna Trail because, again, I think I've mentioned this a couple of times in some notebooks. What's unusual this year in District 2 for Class 1A is that is now a sub-regional with District 11. In years past, it has been with District 1, and because District 1 is so far removed from District 2 geographically, the PIAA allowed District 1 to hold the championship game, and District 2 held the championship game, and then those two teams played automatically in the sub-regional. Well, with this situation and this setup, the District 11 teams are in with the District 2 teams, and District 2 is only guaranteed one spot. It can get two. It could get three if three are in the top four with the District 11 teams. But for right now, you want to try to guarantee that playoff spot.
Yeah.
You know, in years past, Lackawanna Trail would play Old Forge in the regular season. We would say, well, these two teams are probably going to meet again later on in the year in the District 2 final. Well, that's not necessarily a guarantee now. So it was important for Lackawanna Trail, if it, wants to hold on to that number one seed, to win this game. And it certainly played well enough on both sides of the ball. Defense, very impressive. But what can you say, too, Joe, about Old Forge's Cale Krushnowski?
Yeah, exactly.
His fifth kickoff return for a touchdown?
I was going to say 5. That's unbelievable.
Special teams coaches in the Lackawanna Football Conference, this just in. Stop kicking to Cale Krushnowski.
A PSA. It's like the sign that Megan Callahan wrote. 911. Cale Krushnowski's running for it. Kickoff for a touchdown.
It's funny because that's the unusual thing, though, Joe, when you have such a great playmaker like that back deep for kickoffs is, there is a scheme to keep the ball away from him.
Right.
But that still makes him a valuable weapon. I mean, he can always flip sides as the deep back, or he can have players throw the ball back to him if he has to. But even just having teams try to avoid kicking to him is a real weapon for Old Forge and an advantage for them in the specialty games.
Definitely, Joby. Another game that interested me this week, Riverside, Susquehanna. Riverside goes up they win 34-26. But this game, I believe Riverside went up 4 touchdowns in the first half. And then Susquehanna comes all the way back and puts a little bit of scare into Riverside, but Riverside takes care of business. Chase Dodonio, 88 yards rushing and a touchdown on 13 carries, 112 yards passing and 3 touchdowns. Weston Yanoni, another big game, 191 yards rushing on 3 touchdowns on 25 carries, 58 yards passing and a touchdown, I believe overcoming an injury in that game. Just really, I think this shows a lot about, not only Weston Yanoni, but Susquehanna to come back against a really good Riverside team.
Yeah, Joe. Of course, us not being there live in person, we can't get a sense of the momentum shifting in this game. But all be told, look at Riverside came out on fire, and did what it was supposed to do in the first half of that football game when you're playing against an upstart team that was looking to knock you off from the ranks of the unbeaten, and kind of took it to Susquehanna pretty early in that game, 27-0 at the half. But what is interesting, Joe, and I think, this just goes back to what I tell you all the time, is they'd still play the third and fourth quarters.
That's right, Joey.
And as long as that score wasn't 35-0 and got that clock in motion, if you're Susquehanna, you'd feel like you at least got a shot. And so I think it is a great credit to Susquehanna with a sophomore quarterback in Weston Yanoni. I know he's a talented player, but he's still a sophomore. And that's a lot of pressure to put on a kid's shoulders, and he was able to respond, and he brought Susquehanna back, much like he did against Dunmore the first time that Susquehanna showed and kind of got the momentum built in its season. He brought them back and won that football game. So a couple of things you take away from this game, Joe. Again, these are two teams that are going to play in the District 2 Class 2A playoffs.
Yep.
Whether they play each other again remains to be seen. But at the very least now, Riverside, which is an extremely talented team, ranked number 2 in the state in Class 2A by PennLive.com. The players at Riverside are aware that these kids from Susquehanna aren't going to give up, so they know that. And also the kids from Riverside know this, Joe. Those kids have been in the reverse role, okay? Last year, Riverside gave Dunmore a heck of a game in the regular season, come back in the district playoffs, motivated, try and knock Dunmore off. Kids believed that they could beat Dunmore. Dunmore came away with a win in the rematch and then went on to the state semifinals in Class 2A. So I think Riverside now, a little bit of an eye-opener for it, playing against a very inspired Susquehanna team. Also has to keep its eyes on Dunmore in that bracket as well, because if you remember, that's the closest game previous to the Susquehanna game that Riverside had played 16-3 on opening night. So, Riverside's focus now is, obviously that's a big hurdle to clear, beating Susquehanna. Yep. Now we got to keep improving, working toward that postseason.
Absolutely. And like you said, it's good. It's good to get that experience. It's good to get that experience of a close game because, frankly, they've been blowing teams out this year.
Yeah, Joe. And listen, I think that's an important part of high school football. I think every championship team wants to have that one game where, you kind of see how you react to adversity.
Right.
And I think this game certainly is one that Riverside will circle, and that takes nothing away from the outstanding season that Riverside has had right now.
Right.
It's just they came away with a win to boot. Riverside 6-0 for the first time since 2010. This is a team that's got a lot of talent and could be looking at great things if it continues to play the way that it has played, and certainly it continues to improve.
There's that history lesson, Joby. I love it. Love your history. Those were really the big matchups from last week. I believe Josh Vinton had another big week for Western Wayne. Yeah, 246 yards, 5 touchdowns on 20 carries. Holy crap.
Yeah, no, Joe, he's fantastic. Western Wayne is very good. Now, look, we don't want to get ahead of ourselves. I try not to do that in high school football, okay?
Yeah.
Because anything can happen. And there's a lot of football yet to be played. I think Joe Repsha said that to me after the game between Abington Heights and Delaware Valley. But here's what we have right now developing, all right?
Yep.
Scranton Prep is the number 1 team in our area. Western Wayne is number 2.
Right.
Both of those teams are in Class 3A.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? They do not play in the regular season.
Right.
So, it would be nice if we could get that matchup later on down the road.
Right.
But boy, that's going to be a heck of a football game. And both of these teams are very good.
Yes.
Very good.
Absolutely. Joby, I think that wraps it up for, what was that, week 6, Joby?
Week 6, Joe. Yep. So officially for me, week 10, I'm on to now. I follow the James Franklin credo. Week 10.
Week 10, exactly.
For me. And, so I have a lot of the research done for this week's Game Face. We're going to have a pretty neat story, as always. Little tease here for you, Joe.
Yeah.
And look, the game of the week's going to be Abington Heights against Scranton Prep. Let's make no bones about it. That's probably the best game on the slate.
Yep.
And I think anytime you can get a rivalry game here in this late in the season, I think it's important for us to cover that one. So we'll be at that one as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Listen, I want to at least back you, Joby. I do think that's the best game as well. Just so, I want to support you on this. You're going into this stuff alone all the time. And you know what? Let's be together on this. I believe that is the game of the week.
All right, Joe. I'm glad I had some support on that.
You got my support.
A lot better.
I bet.
Really quickly, though, Joe, let's mention, too, that we hope that Mid-Valley's Jacob Lesher is back this week. He had to sit out last week with an injury that we hadn't realized was as severe as it was at the time. And I think he's going to be back. I think things are moving in that right direction. But it was, in case you were looking for some more big numbers statistically, he had to sit out last week against West Scranton.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mid-Valley persevered without him, getting a 35-6 win over West Scranton. But absolutely, let's get Jacob back on the field and healthy. All right, Joby, is there anything else high school wise you wanna touch on here?
No, Joe, but I do want to kind of dive in to the college football scene this weekend because first, before we even get started on Michigan, the Georgia-Alabama game, I was fortunate enough to kind of close my laptop right at kickoff for that game. And I just said, listen, I'm not doing any more work tonight. I'm going to watch this game. And, I'm not a huge SEC guy, as you know, Joe, and, but I do appreciate.
Don't lie to the people, Joby. Don't lie.
Right. I do appreciate the fact that Georgia and Alabama are two of the best programs in the country. But look, as we move forward, Joe, also to the NCAA, where both conferences get 4 automatic berths into the 12-team tournament, which I predicted was going to happen. We're going to get a very, 2-conference heavy NCAA Division I college football profile moving forward. But that being said, it was a fantastic college atmosphere. It was a fantastic game. It was very similar to that Riverside Susquehanna game in a sense that Alabama jumped all over Georgia and had a big lead. And then you saw really the character of a champion in which Georgia has been under Kirby Smart, and Georgia came all the way back, took the lead, and then Alabama quickly responded. But all that being said, I felt really good for former Lakeland tight end C.J. Dippre.
Yeah.
He had his best game overall as an Alabama football player against Georgia. He just was tremendous blocking and really shame on Kirk Herbstreit. I mean, 3 times Alabama broke big plays behind the block that C.J. Dippre made, and Kirk Herbstreit was probably more interested in petting his dog in the press box. But he just sometimes I don't even know what these guys are looking at. But anyway, he also had 3 catches and big contributions to Alabama's victory. And I know it's sometimes hard for even me to digest or even realize that we had a player here in the Lackawanna Football Conference who is not only a Division I player, but he is the starting tight end for now the number 1 team in the country and a team that won the SEC championship last year and played in college football playoff. I think that's pretty big accomplishment for a young man from small town and EPA.
Huge. Absolutely. That game was incredible. And I watched a little bit. We had dinner at my mom's house, and I was just like, yeah, he's from Lakeland. So it was just like, oh yeah. I was just like, yeah, he's from Lakeland. So it's pretty crazy to, like you said, have a kid on the number 1 team in the country and just at Alabama, which has been the number 1 program for the past, 15 years or so.
Yeah. And Joe, look, at Penn State fans in our area have a lot to be encouraged about as well.
Sure.
I know it wasn't a 40-0 blowout, which Penn State fans think the Lions should have every time there's a pseudo whiteout, and certainly for Illinois. But Illinois is a top 25 ranked team, and could not get a first down in the second half. So that says a lot about the defensive intensity that Penn State brings. And I think that's always the great equalizer whenever you get into these games against much tougher competition. Let's not kind of get ourselves fooled by these exhibition games you play outside of conference, okay?
That's right.
When you have a defense as talented and as intense as the Penn State defense, you've got a shot. It looks like right now one of the rankings came out. I think Penn State moved up 2 spots to number 7 overall, and Penn State's number 2 in the Big Ten. So that's real encouraging for Penn State fans for sure.
Definitely. And Joby, I know that you mentioned we were going to get there, but Michigan retains the little brown jug from Minnesota. It wasn't easy. That's for sure.
Well, never is for Michigan, right, Joe?
No. They're doing this thing where they dominate the first half and then just hang on barely in the second half. So
is that a theme this year, Joe?
Yeah, that's what we're going with this year. That's our theme, who's got it better than us? Nobody, I guess. So yeah, that was kind of a gut-wrenching game, but hey, another one on the win column for the Wolverines.
Joe, you got to keep winning.
That's it.
You can't get in the playoffs if you don't win.
That's right. So, Joby, when it comes to the NFL, we didn't.
I lose over, Joe. I mentioned that earlier this year.
That's true. Packers didn't have a good day either.
Made it interesting, though, Joe.
It made it interesting, as they always do. I said this in the second half. I said the Packers will do just enough to make sure you keep watching and have your heart broken at the end. So that's pretty accurate as to what happened in that game. But encouraging signs. Jordan Love looked better in the second half than in the first half. Seems comfortable again, but just took a little too long.
Joe, the NFL script says as long as you're 10-7 or 9-8, you're going to have a shot at the playoffs.
You're going to have a shot at the playoffs. Joby, you know what the matchup is next week?
Joe. Joe.
We're facing off.
Yeah, Joe, and listen, the Rams haven't beaten the Packers in the last 4 times they've played.
I think that's correct, yes.
So I'm not making any silly or crazy bets with you.
Fair. No film room podcast bet? All right.
No, because I've seen the product the Rams are rolling out there on a weekly basis.
That is fair. That's completely fair. So, yeah, and the Eagles lost. Didn't look very good in Tampa.
Oh, yeah, Eagles fans are panicking.
They're panicking. Giants lost on Thursday. Imagine that, right? Giants lost Thursday night to the Cowboys.
How about the Jets and the Giants, both at home this weekend? Neither one of them scored a touchdown.
That's incredible, Joby. It's incredible. Not fun for New York at the moment. So,
and Joe, all is well as Kansas City is still undefeated.
That's right, of course. Not looking good doing it, but 4-0. That's how it goes. So, Joby, you got anything left here, or should we sign off so you could get back to work?
I do have to get back to work, and yes. You know, I try to blot out this 57 and a half minutes out for you.
That's right.
But I do have to wish my daughter Grace, I wish her a happy birthday. Her birthday was last week. She turned 21, which means 2 things. 1, which I don't want to discuss here on the podcast, and 2, that I'm getting extremely old.
Oh, yeah.
We had a very nice celebration. We had a cake, a nice dinner, and she went out last night. So good for her. Congratulations. She reached 21 years of age. And my other daughter, Megan, she's got a very, very stressful week ahead. You and I.
Absolutely. Happy birthday to Grace. And that should just about wrap it up for us on the Film Room Podcast, episode 7.
Yeah, Joe, let's make sure we thank Lilia Calvert. She was a terrific guest.
Absolutely. She was fantastic. Thank you so much, Lilia. Her Athlete of the Week interview with Scott Walsh will be in Tuesday's paper. You can also go to see the many, many stories that Joby writes and we write throughout the week at the Times-Tribune.com/sports. We've got Game Face that comes out every Friday. So get that in the paper, 4-page wrap. And other than that, Joby, great show. And
Joe, thanks for having me. And listeners, tell all your friends about us. Joe does a lot of work in preparation for this podcast.
I appreciate that, Joby. Thanks, man.
Sure. And thanks for having me, my friend.
Of course. Thank you. Take care.
All right.